Do you love the idea of binding a real book, one that opens flat, lasts for years, feels like it came off a bindery shelf, or you want to make a beautiful junk journal? But every tutorial you find has you measuring and mapping and threading through a dozen holes and you just close the video, or you spend all that time thinking you're following the directions and it ends up looking like this. I know the feeling. And that's why my channel focuses on stress-free bookbinding and junk journal making. And today I'm going to show you a binding where little strips of tape or ribbon do almost all of the hard work for you. It's called the sewn-on tapes method. And people have been binding books this way for hundreds of years. It looks like you trained as a bookbinder. I actually made all three of these in an afternoon, and I think you're going to love it. In this video, we are going to be focusing on this method, which is kind of the scrapologist take on the sewn-on tapes method, where the tapes are hidden. We're going to be doing this one today. This one I'm going to be teaching over on my Patreon. So let's set that aside and let's go through the supply list. So here's everything you will need, and I'm sure all of this you probably already have. And the first thing you need, of course, is paper for your signatures. I personally am using lined paper today. This is hammer mill writing paper because I have an art show coming up, and at this particular art show, people always ask me for lined journals. They don't want blank journals, or some of them want junk journals, but most of the people for some reason are asking me for lined journals, so I have a lot of these to make. I'm going to be using this, but you use whatever you normally use, whether it's coffee stain paper, envelopes, or regular paper, whatever you use. For my journal, I'm using 48 sheets. I'll get more into that in a minute. You will need some kind of an awl, whatever you normally use, some thread, some beeswax if you have it, or waxed linen thread. You will need some kind of ribbon or bookbinder's tape, and you will need glue, some kind of white glue. As we get into each stage of the bookbinding, I'll go over the different options for you and talk about what you might be able to use. And of course you're going to need a couple of book covers without a spine. So take your signatures, or take the book apart so that you just have your covers. I prepared my signatures in advance because I assumed that you already know how to do that if you're watching this tutorial. If you have any questions about this, let me know. But I already folded them. I have, in each signature, I have 6 sheets of paper folded in half, and I have 2, 4, 6, I have 8 signatures. You can have however many you want. This seems to be a really good thickness for my journals. People seem to like this thickness. And then you need to cut it down to the width and height of your book, but about 1/8 of an inch less on 3 sides. After I folded these, I did put them in my book press for a couple of hours, and if you don't have a book press, then just use some bricks or some heavy books just to get a little more of a nice fine crease in the folded side of your signatures. I also have a guillotine that is meant for bookbinders, so I can do up to 500 sheets at a time, and so I cut this edge off to make it more flush, but you don't have to do that. And if you have any pages that are kind of sticking out more than you want, you can just use a metal ruler and a razor knife and kind of trim the edge. But those are not things that you really need to worry about at the beginning stage of learning this method. Those are just more details that you might want to think about when you get really good at this method. Now that my signatures are all cut down and flattened and pressed very nicely, I'm just going to do one last test to make sure that everything is fitting in really nicely. So I have my two book covers. Let's see, how does this one go? There we go. And this, I think it turned out beautifully. This was a book cover that the spine was all damaged. I cut it apart. I cut the spine off and made that into a bookmark. But the lettering here was black on black. You couldn't really see it. And what a fun title for a journal. So I just used a white paint pen and did some fancy lettering there. And I think it looks really beautiful. So I'm very happy and excited to be making a journal out of this. But I just want to test and make sure that everything is lining up. So for this method, the spine is completely up against the back of the book. So I want to make sure that I tamp it down. And then you can see that I have about 1/8 of an inch here and 1/8 of an inch here. And I also have 1/8 of an inch here. So this is fitting in here perfectly. Very happy with the way this looks. It's going to be beautiful. So I'm going to set my covers aside. And the next thing that I do before I start anything else is I just put a tiny dot in the upper right corner of all of my signatures. And I've already done this, but I just wanted to show you so that I know what the head of the book, this is the head, this is the tail, or the head is also the top. And that way, as I'm flipping these around and sewing them, I always know that that's the top of my book. So now that our signatures are ready, let's prepare our tapes. I do use a non-adhesive linen bookbinder's tape, and I'll put a link below if you want to purchase them for yourself. And you can see what a really nice tight weave this has. You don't want anything that's going to flex this way. So if you don't have access to this, you can also use any tightly woven ribbon that you might have on hand. This would be very nice, although it's a little too wide for this particular book that I'm doing. And you do want your straps to be at least 3/4 of an inch wide. You can also do paper straps, but those have to be constructed in a very particular manner for strength, and that's not something that I'm going to do in this tutorial today. You could probably Google that and look it up if you want to make your straps out of paper. But certainly bookbinding linen tape and any kind of tightly woven fabric or ribbon that you have on hand is going to work. Let's get one of our book covers out again. And you want to cut this down to the bookbinder manual that I follow says 1 2/3 the width of your book block, but I just do 2. It's easier. So 2 times the width, and cut that off. So my piece here is now, let's see, approximately 10 inches, probably a little more than I need. Maybe 8 inches would have been better, but that's okay. You can always trim this later, and especially if you're a beginner, just always have more thread and more tape than you actually need. So I'm going to cut 3 of these, and I can move this out of the way now. Because I'm going to have 3 tapes across the back of my spine. And now we need to prepare our sewing stations. My book is 8 inches high, so I have just a scrap piece of paper that's 8 inches high, and I usually like about 2 inches wide. That seems to be a good workable width for me. So what we're going to have is we're going to have a kettle stitch here which is just a very simple stitch. Don't be intimidated by it. It's just a loop, that's all. We're going to have a kettle stitch on the bottom and the top, and then we're going to have our tapes in the middle. So let's figure out where we want to put those. Because I have a punching trough, I am going to fold this in half to mark my holes. If I can get it in half. There we go. I'm using a little bit of a thicker scrap of paper here. Okay, so I'm going to mark my holes in this valley here because I have a punching trough. If you don't have a punching trough, I would recommend that you put your holes at the edge of your paper so that you can just set it in like this and punch your holes this way. The reason for this is that you can see the crease. If you don't have a punching trough and you try it this way, oftentimes you won't end up going directly through the crease. It might be up here a little bit, a little harder to see. So this is much more accurate. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is mark our kettle stitches. And I'm going to do a dot up here again to show that this is my head and this is my tail, so it will match up exactly with my signatures. The kettle stitches are 1/2 inch from the head and the 1/2 inch from the tail. So I'm going to mark 1/2 inch from the top of my little sheet here and 1/2 inch from the bottom. And I'll just put a little K there for you. These are the two kettle stitches. Then we have to figure out where our tapes are going to go. And that is super easy. The first tape we just want in around the center of our signature. You can mark it if you want. You can measure it if you feel more comfortable doing that. So mine's going to be about 4 inches here. Okay, so my tape is going to be right about here. I'm going to put it in the center. And then I'm going to be sewing. Let me zoom in a little bit more. Okay, we're going to be sewing on either side of the tape. So we need 2 marks on either side of our tape. And you want it close to your tape, but you don't want it too close, because if you put it too close and you start to sew, it's going to pucker your tape. So make sure that you can clearly see your 2 dots. And I'm going to remove this little center dot here that I don't need anymore so I don't get confused. Bad eraser. Okay, so here's 1 tape. And let's just eyeball the others. So they're kind of equidistant, but again, we don't have to measure. That looks good to me, so I'm just going to again do a dot on each side of these tapes. And there we have our sewing stations. So a tape is going to be here, a tape's going to go here, and a tape is going to go here. And then we're going to have our kettle stitch on the top and the bottom. And here's our little mark showing where the head of the template is. As I mentioned, I do have a punching trough, and I keep all of my little templates inside the punching trough, so I always know where they are. And this is just something that I made out of chipboard and string. This one's starting to get a little thrashed. I've been getting ready for an art show, and I've been making a lot of journals. But this is really a lifesaver. It just makes punching your signature so much easier. I have a tutorial on how I made this. I'll put the link below. So now it's time to punch our holes for our signatures. So I am going to find the center of my signature, put my template in here, and then tamp it to make sure that everything is lined up. There's one, perfectly in the center, in the crease, which is where we want it. And this is my top, so I'm just going to set this over like this and pick up my next one and just do all 8 of these signatures. There we go, and let me just tamp these down, and my holes look perfectly aligned. Very happy with that. And I will add this template to my little stack of templates here that are going in my punching trough, because I seem to have a lot of books, older books that are that exact size, 8 inches high. So hang on to that so I don't have to make it again. Now let's get out our thread. I have to decide what color I want here. I think I will use brown for this. And I do have a video on where I get my bookbinding supplies and what I use for thread and needles. I have a video available, I think, on YouTube. I know it's in Patreon, going through my supplies. The amount of thread that you need would be the height of your signature times the number of signatures that you have. So I have 8, so I'm going to do 8 plus 1, so add 1 extra. So I have 8 signatures. I'm doing 9 lengths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And I've shown this many times before, but I'll just show it again. Little bookbinder's trick for threading your needle. Take your thread, put your needle down through the thread, and then push down and pull, and now your needle, your thread is not going to come off your needle. This was a lifesaver for me when I learned this, because I was always pulling, my thread was always falling out of my needle, and it made sewing frustrating for me. So that little trick really helped. And now I'm just going to wax my thread, which is optional. You can buy thread that's already waxed. I'm not using this today because it's just way too thick. I don't want that millimeter today for this particular book, so I'm just going to wax it. And as I said, it's optional. It just helps so that the thread goes through the holes a lot easier and it's not as apt to tear your holes. You can buy one of these little doohickeys here online. I'll put a link below if I can find where I found this. I know a lot of people get really frustrated and nervous about the whole sewing part of bookbinding and junk journal making, and so I'm trying to give you little tips that just make things a lot easier. Okay, that's got a little bit of wax on it. I don't like a lot of wax because then my fingers feel greasy. Always tamp your signatures down and make sure they're all together very nicely before you start your sewing. And what we're going to do is put our first signature down. This is my head, this is my tail, because I know that because I have my little dot there. And I'm going to put the tape on almost halfway, half of it up on the book and half of it on the table. And then I'm going to take some washi tape and tape my linen tape down to my work desk. And I usually work right over on the edge of my desk. It's a lot easier. These can dangle down. It's easier to sew, but I don't really have the ability to film on the edge of my desk as nicely as this camera here. So I'm just gonna modify my habit. Okay, so we're going to start our sewing. And for the first two sections, we're basically just going in and out. It's really easy. I'm going to call this sewing station 1, and this is sewing station 8, because we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sections. So we're going to start on the outside of our first section here. Okay, so I'm going to go from the outside to the inside. Oh, I'm having trouble doing it in a way that I don't normally do it. And I like it on the edge of my desk, and then I just go boop. Okay, got it. Okay, so we're going from the outside to the inside of station 1. We're going to pull. It's a lot of thread, so pull it almost all the way through, but please leave at least 2 inches of cord here. We're going to need that at the end. Okay, and I'm even leaving a little more than that, 2 inches. Okay, so we've pulled it almost all the way through. Now we're just going to go out station 2. Then pull slowly so that your thread, because we have so much thread here, just pull it nice and slowly so that it doesn't bunch up and you don't end up with any knots. And here is another bookbinding trick. It's very important. It helps so that your holes don't tear. As you're pulling this taut, always pull in the direction in which you're sewing. So we're sewing in this direction. I'm going to pull this a little taut this way. Not this way, not up, not down, but in the direction in which I'm sewing. And we're going to tighten this up a little bit later, so don't worry too much about how taut it is. Just give it a little tug. Now let's position it with our tape. And we're going to now sew over the tape. So we're going to go in through station 3. Always make sure it actually came out through the signature, the middle of the signature. It's okay that this is moving around. Don't worry about that. We're going to position it before we tighten it. So now let's put our tape here and pull that a little snug. And there's our first one, and we're just going to keep going in and out, in and out. So now I'm going to go out through station 4. And this has such a rhythm to it. It's really kind of relaxing and fun. I do enjoy this stitch. And now we're going to sew over this tape by going into number 5. Remember to keep this tail here. Don't pull so taut that you're getting rid of this. Okay, and I'm going to pull in this direction. Just a little bit. And go in through the next signature. I think that's 6. Go in through 7 around our tape. And then come out through station 8. This would be the time to go ahead and kind of pull it taut. So I'm going to go this way. And just check. It's always good to check your tension from the inside, not the outside. Okay. Now we're just going to sew on the second section. We are, again, just going to go in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out. I'm going to go in through, starting at the head this time. And again, making sure that my little dot is up here so my holes line up. Now I'm just going to go in through station 8. And now I'm pulling my thread this way, you see, because we're sewing this way. Out through 7. At this point, you do want to make sure that you're never sewing through your tape. I've done that a couple times where my needle has come out through the tape by accident. So just take your time, make sure you're not doing that. There is a deformity in this thread. There we go. Okay, see I'm pulling tight. I'm going to line my signatures up here. Pull it. Okay, that little deformity in the thread is kind of driving me a little nuts, but I can deal with it. Let's make sure our tape is up, and we're going to go through station 6. And you want to pull your tape up a little too so that it's not starting to pucker. Just make sure it's nice and flat. Come out the next station. See that little knot there in the thread? I'm looking forward to getting past that. I'm going to have to This is very expensive thread, and I'm going to have to contact them and let them know. Because it's Bookbinder's thread. It's meant for this, and it shouldn't have little knots in it like that. Lining this up. Make sure my tape is nice and flat, and then pull towards the right. Give it a nice taut, make it nice and taut, but don't pull so hard that you're going to tear anything. And then we're going to go back out. Making sure that I'm not sewing through my linen tape. Boy, there's another one. That's a big one. So over my tape. Yeah. Oops, I got distracted by that knot and forgot what I was doing here. Okay. Whoops. All right. And we're coming out our last hole. Okay, so I'm just gonna make sure these line up, make sure my tapes aren't bunched up. Tape is coming off here. And pull taut to the right. Now the next signature is our odd signature. So this is where we do the kettle stitch. Oh, sorry, before we put on the third section, we need to just take this little tail here that we have left over from earlier and just tie a knot between the two signatures here to tie the two signatures together here. Just a regular square knot. But we're going to keep this tail. Don't cut that off yet. Okay, now we can do our third signature. Okay, so we have our third section. We're going to go in our thread is on the outside here. We're leaving this little tail here. We're going to go in through station 1. And I think I need to make my holes bigger on this one. Okay, so I'm going in through 1. And we're doing the same thing, just in and out, sewing over our tapes until we get to the very end, and then we're going to do a kettle stitch. So this is where our kettle stitch comes in. Before we do that, let's just make sure none of your threads are puckering. Go to the inside, and these are too loose, so I'm going to give them a nice pull in this direction. Make sure everything's nice and taut, and make sure everything is lined up this way and this way. Just keep adjusting that as you go. Keep lining everything up. And this is loose. So see, this is why you like to make it's easier to make the adjustments from the center of your book instead of the outside. I noticed that it was not taut enough here, so okay. So now that we have come out station 8 of our third signature, because this is an odd signature, we're going to do our kettle stitch. So what you're going to do is go down through the loop or the stitch that you created on between the two previous pages. Come out through that, and once you have a nice loop there, you're just going to put your needle through the loop. Make sure your signatures are nice and even. Make sure on the inside everything is taut before you do this, and pull. For this one, you do want to pull upwards till that's nice and taut. Now we're going to put on section 4. And now we're going to start doing kettle stitches. So we're going to do the straight stitch, and then at the end of this one, we're going to do another kettle stitch. So I'm going to speed up while I do the in and out here, and I will slow it down again at the kettle stitch so you can see it one more time. Okay, so here we are with our fourth section or signature, and I just came out of station 1. Had a little bit of difficulty because I'm used to having this taped to my desk, but I want to be able to pick it up and show you because we're going to do another kettle stitch. We're going to go in through the previous signature, the stitch that we made in between signature 2 and 3. Pull it through, leaving a loop. Here we have a loop, and then we're going to go in through the loop and pull up, making sure everything is nice and taut on the inside, which it is. Give it a nice tug. So I am going to put my last 3 signatures on. Make sure that when you get to the end of each, you do a kettle stitch. Wherever you've ended up, that's where your kettle stitch is going to be. So we are sewing down on for the even sections, and we're sewing up for the odd sections. So on the even sections, your kettle stitch would be down here. On the odd sections, your kettle stitch is going to be up here. So that's what I'm going to do for the remaining 3 sections, and I will be back to show you how to do the very last section. Okay, I have sewn all of my signatures on. This is what it should look like. And we're going to just tie off our last piece of thread here. So we're on the outside of section 8. At this point, make sure everything's even. You also want to give a tug on your cords to make, or your threads, to make sure that they didn't bunch up, which sometimes happens. I had difficulty with my camera, unfortunately, when I was sewing the last signature, so I have a little practice text block here that I can show you on. It's not the one I was just working on, but it's okay. You'll still be able to see what it's supposed to look like anyway, or what we're supposed to do. So you should have ended up out of signature 1 on your last signature. Station 1, sorry, on your last signature. So now you should have these 2 strings dangling out. And what we're going to do is we are still going to do a kettle stitch because that's how we've ended every one. Going to go in through the stitch that was in between sections 6 and 7 and go up through my loop here and pull nice and taut. And because this is our very last one, I'm going to do 2 kettle stitches. So I'm just going to do this again through that stitch and up through and pull it taut. Now we want to get rid of that string that's hanging out, so if we're to do that, we are going to go down through the hole, the first hole of the last signature, down through the hole, and make sure you're not going through your thread. Make sure you come out the middle. And that piece of thread is not normally there, it's just because I'm using a practice book here. So pretend that's not there. We're going to come out through the hole. I'm going to go under the stitch and through the loop and pull up. And I'm going to do it again, but this time I'm going to come from the top down. Forming a loop again and going up through, pulling it towards the top of the book there, towards the right. And now we can go ahead and snip this extra piece of thread off. And yes, you will have a knot there, but you need it there, and that's fine. That's how it's supposed to look. Now we have this piece of thread on the bottom, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to pass it into the hole, station 1, and this time it's our very first signature that we did. Going to come out through and go through that stitch a couple of times, once from the bottom to the top and once from the top to the bottom, going through the loop and pulling taut towards the right. I do it one more time with my fumble fingers here and snip that off, and that's how we do our last two pieces of thread. Now this is where things became a bit of a challenge for me when I was first doing this method, because I have an existing book cover that I don't want to cut into. Normally what you would do is you would cut slits, 3 slits in the book cover, and thread this through the book cover, and then the tapes kind of show like this. And that's a really nice look. I just like the look of this book cover. So I had to figure out how to do this, and I looked everywhere, couldn't find a method, so I sort of invented my own, and it works for me. It seems very solid, lays flat, and so I have been very happy with this method that I sort of came up with here. What we're going to do is we do need to bring these in, and we're going to fold this paper in half and glue them inside. So first, let's just fold this first paper in half and make sure it's very neatly to the edge here. So I'm just going to clip these off at the crease. We are going to need a protective sheet here in between our 2 pieces of paper so our glue doesn't get on our actual journal pages. And I'm using bookbinding glue, but you can use any white glue, including Elmer's glue if you want. And I'm going to make sure that that's really snug down in that corner so I don't get any on the spine. So I'm going to be very careful when I get down to this end. I'm going to just put the glue down first. Being very careful when I get to the end here. I don't need a lot because I already put some down at this end. I don't really need to put it all the way up to the edge here. And then we're going to take our tapes, make sure they're pulled taut, and make sure they're not puckered. And we're going to put them on this sheet of paper here. Let's add a little more glue on the tapes themselves just to make sure they're secure. And then we are going to very neatly fold this sheet of paper up. And I'm going to use my bone folder to burnish that. Make sure our glue isn't squeezing out on this side. It's okay if it squeezes out everywhere else. Okay. That looks good. I'm going to flip it over and do the other side, the same thing. This is going back in my book press, and I'm going to press this flat, and I will be back once it dries, and we'll put the covers on. Okay, so it's now the next day, and you'll have to excuse me because I've come down with a cold, so sorry for my voice, but my little flaps are dry. It's okay if it's a little stuck because this thing is not going to be seen. And so the next thing I want to do is I'm just going to cut a little bit of this off just to make it a little cleaner. We don't need all of this, but I can see my tape is here. I'm not going to cut into my tape at all. And I'm going to cut right to the corner on both of these just to get rid of some of the excess and clean up the edge there a little bit. I'm going to do the same for the back, a little back flap. Just right to the corner, being careful not to cut into my signature. Okay, and now we're ready to put our covers on. So we need our little sheets here again, and some glue, and then make sure that your book is oriented in the right way, that your head or your top is up here and your tail is down here. Make sure your paper's all the way in so you don't get any glue on it. And we are just going to put glue on this flap and then carefully put the cover on like this, and then we're going to press it down. My paintbrush happens to be in the sink, so I'm actually going to just use one of these. These work just as fine, and actually they're cheaper than paintbrushes. And we do need to get glue all the way to the edge. And I put way too much glue on here on my paintbrush. And we don't want the glue squeegeeing out onto the spine. Okay, because of my angle that I don't normally work at, I can't see if I have glue everywhere. Yeah, it looks like I do. Looks like I could use a little more right at the edge. Okay. And I am just going to line my book up vertically and horizontally. And remember that you're going to have about 1/8 of an inch higher, more book cover on the top and the bottom. It's going to be a little bit bigger than your signature. And that looks perfect. I'm just going to press it down. And it's on there very well. Good. So let's just burnish it. And then we are going to press it before we move on to the next step. Burnish that down really good. Okay, that looks great. Yes, I'm very happy with that. Let's do the back. Same thing. And I'm going to pull this up just a little bit. so that I can make sure that my book covers are in alignment this way. So one's not higher than the other, in other words. And it looks great. Press it down and burnish it. When you burnish it, hold your book up like this. Don't hold it out like this. You might tear this. Just going to carefully burnish it and make sure it's all really good in the corner there. Okay. I should have kept my sheet in there. Now at this point, because we're using glue, I do normally like to put these in and put it back in my book press, because glue does tend to make things, paper and especially chipboard, really, it will warp it, and it doesn't necessarily dry really flat. But just for the purposes of this video, I'm going to go ahead and cover my inside covers. So I have 2 sheets that match perfectly my inside cover, leaving a little bit of the border. And you want it to butt up against our pages here. And that is perfect. Now, I am using, of course, if you follow me, you know I'm using wallpaper. And if you're new here, I went and bought out a wallpaper store that was going out of business. So I have a ton of wallpaper for sale in my shop. I use it all the time for book covers, end papers, everything. I love it. I love it way better than scrapbook paper. So I'm using a couple of pieces of wallpaper. If you want to use something else like scrapbook paper, I would suggest that it not be the same weight as your signatures, like copy paper. Well, this is Hammermill fine writing paper, which is a little heavier than copy paper, but I would not use something like this because it's not going to help hold this structure in place. You need something a little thicker. So if you want to use scrapbook paper, I would maybe take something, let me get this big blob of glue off here before I get it on something. I would maybe take something like this. This is the cover. It's very, very light cardboard or heavy stock cardstock. This is the top piece of a paper pad. I save these and use them for all kinds of things. So I would maybe take a piece of this and cover it with the scrapbook paper and then put it down if you have some scrapbook paper that you want to use, because you want something really sturdy. Or take 2 pieces of scrapbook paper and glue them together to make this sturdier. So anyway, the point is you need something that's really nice, that's not going to tear, nice and sturdy to hold this structure in place. So I am going to go ahead and put glue on this and glue these down. You want to make sure you have really good coverage with your glue. You could use double-sided tape, but use a lot of it. Make sure you have coverage over the whole sheet. And this is the beauty of glue. You can move it around until you get it exactly where you want it. And then I am going to pick this up and burnish it again. And I'm going to look and just make sure that glue isn't squishing out my spine. Okay, I think that's burnished down really well. I'm going to put my sheet in here and do the front cover. And then back into my book press. This goes to dry. Again, if you don't have a book press, just weigh it under some heavy, heavy books so that none of this bubbles up while it's drying. My book is now out of the book press. It is finished, but you know what I did? I was so sick when I was trying to finish up this video that I put my pages in upside down. So remember how I told you to mark the upper right hand corner? I did not check my pages are supposed to be like this. And so I just went and cut my tapes. I'm going to pull this off and I am going to start all over again, unfortunately. I should not craft when I'm not feeling well. I didn't. That one mistake ruined this whole book for me. But it is going to look beautiful once I fix it and it's actually done. And let me just show you. So the Queen Bee I did in the exact same, with the exact same technique. So there are our kettle stitches on the bottom and the top, and here is that long stitch or running stitch that goes over all the tapes. I do plan on putting a little bit of color on the edges of the book here because the chipboard, the cardboard is just showing through, but it lays nice and flat. This is what it should look like. You're going to have your stitches in the center that should be nice and taut. You are going to see your cords here, which gives it a beautiful look, but that's what helps it lay flat. If it's completely too close together, it's not going to lay flat. So I did the same exact technique for this one. As I said, over on Patreon, I'm going to show the traditional method where you actually put the tapes through the book cover and we use end papers. And I scared myself for a minute there. I thought I put these pages in upside down too. But no, I just have the books up, the book upside down. Phew! But there we go. This is a beautiful method as well. And if you're looking for another quick and easy bookbinding method, go check out my video on the lark's head binding. This is like a macrame technique, and I did this one with envelopes. But it lies flat and you can stuff it, and it's a great way to make a junk journal. So lots of options, lots of things for you to check out. Don't do what I did here. I really hope that you enjoyed this video. I enjoyed making it for you. Go check out my Patreon if you want to do this one with us, and I will see you in the next video when I'm feeling a little better and I'm not going to be so stupid. Okay? Thanks, bye.